Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I am Krizan Bosch, for those of you that don't know me, a member of the Gauteng Provincial Legislature and a member of the Community Safety Oversight Committee in Gauteng, and joined by my colleague today, Michael Sun, who will be assisting me with some of the questions to our panel members. And I just want to welcome you to today's important webinar, where we will be unpacking the newly proposed draft regulations by CIRA, as well as the latest developments surrounding firearm restrictions in South Africa. I'm really honored to be joined by two respected voices in this field of public safety in South Africa and law enforcement oversight. So firstly, I've got Alderman J.B. Smith, the Mayoral Committee Member for Safety and Security in the City of Cape Town, and known for his direct approach to tackling crime and strengthening community safety. And then I've also got Ian Cameron, a well-known advocate for community policing. He started off as an activist in the field and currently serving as a chairperson for the Parliamentary Committee for Police Oversight. Ian has been vocal proponent for accountability and transparency in law enforcement. So together we'll be exploring what these new regulations mean for private security, gun ownership, and broader crime prevention efforts, and most importantly, what they mean for the ordinary South Africans in our country. So let's just start straight and dive into it. So first of all, welcome JP and welcome Ian, and thank you for sharing this platform with me today. Can I just check if you are able to speak and if you are able to unmute yourself?
There we go.
Okay, JP, we've got you, and Ian, we've got you. Okay, great. So JP, let's start with you. As someone deeply involved in community safety and probably our longest serving MMC in this country as a DA MMC, can you maybe just also tell us what is your initial reaction to the proposed CIRA regulations, and do they help or hinder the city's ability to combat crime effectively through partnerships with private security?
Krizan, thank you, and greetings to everyone who is online. So firstly, the city is submitting extensive comment on these draft proposals. Just the notes on that is 11 pages. I think the first point to make is that we think that the minister is engaging in overreach, in that the regs that they are seeking to make rules on are not within the mandate of what they're allowed to make rules on. The law spells out what aspects of private security regulation they can make laws on, and there are aspects of these rules that stray outside of that narrow ambit. Apologies. As we have seen with traffic and firearm regulations in the past, I think it's often a case in South Africa that the baby is thrown out with the bathwater. There are sometimes good intentions that get waylaid in the drafting process, and then presumably other agendas overlaid on it. And that's how you get ARTA. ARTA started with a good common sense principle that we need a point demerit system so that people don't just offend, but that repeated bad driving behavior creates some more lasting consequences. That's a solid principle, but the devil was in the detail, and then eventual overreach in the legislation, which the city threatened constitutional court action on, and ARTA then abandoned some of that. So I think one must probably, in regards to this, early on say in this conversation, place on record that South Africa cannot function at this stage without private security. National government has allowed the resources and the capacity in SAP to atrophy to such a severe point that the National Police Service cannot protect the public or the business community. But we must also say that we cannot pretend that there are not problems within the private security industry. There are rogue companies that have organized crime links that are part of the problem, whose names pop up in extortion syndicates. But there are provisions within the current CIRA regs and other relevant legislation that allow for action to be taken. And the problem has been, perhaps more than anything, the lack of resources within CIRA to investigate and take effective action against some of these rogue operators And the actions of those few rogue companies is then used as justification for overbroad and sweeping changes that impairs public safety. And that is something that we will make very specific and pointed comments to in terms of attacking the particular regs when we submit by the deadline.
Okay, well, Cape Town has a unique reliance on both municipal and private safety initiatives, as you said. So how might these regulations affect that delicate ecosystem as such?
So from many years ago, reading, I had my views on this matter framed by, I think Julie Berger is her name. She was with the UCT's Institute for Criminology, now the Safety Governance Institute. And she wrote a fascinating piece that really got me thinking on the issue of plural policing, using every possible resource to achieve a collective outcome. And from that, we then tried to have as inclusive an approach to private security as we could. I have tried to get our senior staff to sign memoranda of agreement with security companies who already contract for the city in other regards through our city improvement districts and so forth, to have a closer relationship with our control room, and 5 areas of distinct collaboration around sharing comms, sharing crime information, sharing emergency alerts, assisting each other. There are important areas of collaboration where we can work together and where we can enhance our working relationship. In July 2021, South Africa saw a horrible display of public disorder and mass public violence and looting, which the National Police Service was not able to bring into check. And where we saw the important role that neighborhood watches and private security played. In Cape Town, we were able to avoid any such looting incidents. And a big part of that was neighborhood watches and private security, sometimes each on their own, sometimes hand in hand, quite literally arm in arm, forming human chains and response units around economic infrastructure and critical infrastructure to prevent that from happening. And in places like Mitchell's Plain and Langa and Panorama and many other parts of our city, we saw either neighborhood watches or private security rising to the occasion, and some private security companies really stepped forward. That was the start for us of saying we need to vastly improve our relationship with private security. And so we have now rolled out a specific app that we will start working with the private security on and training them on, so that we can work more closely together, that we become an extension of each other, the so-called Trusted Partner app. And we started a particular pilot called the Community Safety Initiative, where we do drills in different communities, sign memorandum of agreement with private security companies and neighborhood watches and other public safety and civic protection entities, so that if we ever have a replay of July 2021, we can do what we did last time, but better and much more coordinated, using the same technology, the same comms channels. And the only way you do that is to practice it. So we are every month or every second month doing a drill somewhere in Cape Town. We're doing 4 or 5 simulation exercises, mainly with private security and neighborhood watches, to practice how this would work, to simulate these public disorder incidents, and to sign agreements with these private security companies. We value that relationship, and it's not something I would like to see impaired by legislation that is not well thought through.
Yeah, and just for everyone watching, I can confirm that those simulations are indeed taking place. Last month, I visited JP and I went on a tour through the operational center, and I actually saw it on the screen, how they were doing it in the ops center. So it was quite magnificent to view. So JP, do you see, you started touching on it, but is there any like constitutional or operational red flag specifically in this firearm, in how firearm access or security personnel licensing might be handled under this new draft regulations that we specifically need to watch out for or be aware of?
I think somebody like Ian Cameron and otherwise is going to give you better and more detailed insights on this, but there is perhaps just a broad point I can make shortly. And that is that I always become worried when I see national government engaging in attempts to disarm law-abiding owners of firearms, while failing to take effective action against illegal possession of firearms. This is, for me, a red flag. We have seen this play out in South African legislation over and over. We saw former Minister Cele's obsession with disarming the public. And I get very nervous when I see national government do that, because we cannot trust them to protect us, nor can we trust what happens to confiscated firearms once they hit the National Armory. Mark Shaw, in his book, Give Us More Guns, indicate that we probably saw around 9,000 firearms being sold to taxi associations and gangsters. And we are finding those. In the last 7 days, Cape Town took 15 firearms off the street in just 7 days, illegal firearms, and about 450 guns a year at this stage that we're taking off. But our conviction rate is around 1%, because as soon as we confiscate that firearm and arrest that person, we hand them over to SAPS. And that's where the wheels fall off, with inadequate forensic firearm ballistic testing capabilities, massive backlogs, great labs, but totally under-resourced, good people in SAPS trying to make it work, but completely under-resourced in terms of the volumes they're expected to face. And so much of the work we do is simply annulled. It's simply rendered null and void by the fact that these criminals are recycled back onto the streets, and their cases are withdrawn by and large, mostly because of the delayed ballistic testing that sees those cases withdrawn. We are working with many people, including our mayor and our premier and our MEC and Ian Cameron as the provincial portfolio chair and others, to look at creating this capacity in-house and to doing more of this stuff so that we can get better convictions. But the bottom line is, at the moment, is that we are not effectively convicting people with illegal firearms. And so when national government then says to us, well, we're unable to fix this, we have a lack of interest in fixing that, because it's something we've raised over many years, many times, in writing to the provincial commissioner, to SAPS, to the national commissioner, the national minister, and otherwise we've made office of resources to investigate the sources of this endless supply of ammunition that keeps on landing on the streets, often in new boxes of ammo with manufacturer's stamp on. How is it that you are unable to do that, or unable to take us up on our offer, but you have this level of determination to go after legal firearm owners? So there are challenges. Not everybody in the industry does what they're supposed to, and we do need effective regulation. But what we must not do is masquerade or use that as an excuse for making bad regulation that overreaches and that starts punishing all South Africans as a collective. Thank you.
Thanks, JP. So, Ian, over to you. Can you, closer to Parliament and closer to where this legislation is going to be, voted on, can you tell me, from a parliamentary oversight perspective, what does the timing and tone of these regulations suggest about the national government strategy on crime and security?
Yeah, so I obviously join JP in a lot of the worrying parts of what he said. I want to start off by actually saying that one of the things that concerns me the most about this is the timing of the draft. Now, the reason I say that is that we're still seeing record highs of crime, specifically violent crime in South Africa. And yes, and it's important to commend SAPS on certain parts and other partners, like the work, for example, that City of Cape Town does, and security companies for that matter, community safety structures too, that we acknowledge some of the success that we have seen over the last year, because there have been, a few examples of improvement. But violent crime levels are still extremely high. And when this kind of a draft comes out during a time when we are struggling to keep our heads above water with violent crime, it shows something of a disconnect between government, specifically with regards to policy formulation and what the reality on ground level is. I think, what stands out from what JP just said, and the City of Cape Town is a very good example of this, is that instead of government, and specifically national government and CIRA specifically, strengthening collaboration with proven partners, whether it's private security, community safety structures, and obviously other different state institutions. The regulations actually appear to now consolidate regulatory power without any form of real benefit. In my opinion, there's little or no benefit in these regulations, and in fact, I think it will hamper any kind of positive cooperation. Furthermore, I think it's important to also mention that it's critical that no or not one institution on its own ever has the monopoly on your safety, and this is very, very important. When we have the correct checks and balances in place, the police should have a role to play. Private security should play a significant role, and so too community safety structures. And I think those three, broadly speaking, and obviously I'm including municipal police, provincial structures, etc., but in balance, they should complement each other. This piece of regulation, though, doesn't really give us the idea of broader cooperation. In fact, it actually seems that it's a shift away from accountability, from the state's failure to secure or keep anyone safe in the country, and it's actually starting to disempower non-state actors. So, yeah, it's very concerning. From a parliamentary oversight perspective, we'll obviously make sure that it goes through the relevant processes. But I must emphasize that we would have, rather preferred for the consultation to happen beforehand. I can already see with CIRA's responses on social media and the way they've spoken in the media, so far, they didn't expect the kind of pushback that they're receiving. And I think it's important that the private security industry, but so too other role players, keep on pushing back on this. And I know we're going to talk about the details of that later, but yeah, just a few opening thoughts for some of the concerns.
So, based on these concerns, do you think that there's a complete overreach or vague wording in the draft regulations that might lead to unintended consequences, especially for private gun owners or community safety groups?
Yeah, there's a major overreach. So I think there are a few things that stand out with regards to that, and I think there's some of it that should actually be questioned in terms of being constitutional or not. I've got serious concerns when it comes to the way that they can basically or that they do away with the principle of being innocent before proven otherwise. The perception is created by this that CIRA can arbitrarily just close your business. They can basically overnight stop you from operating if they deem fit that you're being investigated for something. There's no real reason that they need to give, and they haven't really gone into any depth for when they can make such a decision. The impact of this would typically be that, tonight you might have armed response at your house. A business might be protected by armed security, and by tomorrow that could be gone. And that is literally how serious it is. I think furthermore, it creates a total monopoly where they can dictate how you do business, and very strange suggestions that they make, almost as though they live on another planet. The idea that you need a tracking unit in every single firearm. I'm not sure who they've been consulting with, but in the real world, there's no security industry globally that I'm aware of at the moment that is able to roll something like this out, never mind in a country that struggles to keep the lights on. So major concerns in terms of some of the proposals being totally unrealistic. In terms of further overreach and confusion, I think there are parts of the regulations that directly contradict or infringe on parts of the Firearm Controls Act. They infringe and create major confusion with regards to the Criminal Procedure Act. And again, in terms of being constitutional or not, I think there are major parts that we will continue to question. And obviously, Again, I emphasize why it's so critical for as many people as possible, whether you are part of a private security business or not, to submit the relevant objections.
So, South Africa has got a really high crime rate. What's your view on these regulations and how these firearm restrictions might impact the ability of law-abiding citizens to defend themselves, or contribute to local safety efforts? I specifically got asked the question over the weekend relating to farm murders, for instance, and where farmers are left to their own devices to try and protect themselves in rural areas, far away from police stations, etc., with private security. What is your view on this?
Yeah. So before I get to the actual gap that could be left by private security, I want to take it one step further in terms of the actual risk that it poses for increased criminal activity by rogue actors. Now, why do I say this? Well, the criminals in the private security industry are simply going to continue doing what they do. So whether they have a regulator or not, whether they've done so corruptly or not, it's irrelevant to them. They'll continue to do what they do. And this actually opens a door for something like extortion to just be pushed even further, become even bigger of a problem. So obviously you'll have these rogue actors starting to become even better in a negative sense with what they do. In terms of other parts, it will certainly reduce visibility and responsiveness, even tactical readiness of private security teams. One of the most ridiculous parts of the regulations indicated that they would need to give Sarah 7 days notice before using certain types of non-lethal tools. So, it basically means that if there's, for example, unrest at a mine and it turns violent, we need to tell the protesters to just please hang back for 7 days, because we just quickly need to consult with Sarah to determine whether we can do anything less lethal, or should we shoot at people with sharp ammunition. And I know it sounds sarcastic when I say it that way, but that is literally how ridiculous it is. In terms of the security vacuum, it's a fact that the South African Police Service does not have the capacity that they need, firstly, to be visible where they need to be, and that they can't respond effectively. I mean, not too long ago, there was a survey done where they tested the rate at which SATS responds to emergencies. And on average, the response time in urban areas was 22 minutes. Now, you can imagine, and that's quite a few years ago, it's probably gotten worse by now. And now you want to remove the only role player, or risk losing the only role player that can actually effectively respond and that has been effectively filling the gap in terms of visibility that you as a state stakeholder hasn't been able to do. In terms of high risk areas, whether it's business related logistics, let's talk about cash in transit heists, it will disproportionately be impacted. Again, the perception is created that you only need certain kinds of weapons, for example, for certain types of roles. And while there is a part of truth to it, the idea is given that, yes, you can transport high risk goods with semi-automatic assault rifles, but you can't guard them with the same. So, in essence, and again, I guess it sounds sarcastic, but it's the truth. You would then be able to rob a jewelry store with a knife. That's what it comes down to. And then the last one or two things, Krizan, is I think a very likely consequence is an increased resort to personal firearm ownership, which in my opinion shouldn't be seen as a consequence, but some would probably see it as an opportunity. The risk of it, though, is that we'd have a more uncoordinated self-defense approach. So I'm all for people defending themselves being lawfully armed, but I think it's important that we do so in a coordinated way, and that we want to actually work with private security entities. You want to even work with the police where possible. So we don't want to lose, the initiative with that. And then I think the last part is just to not put so many people's jobs at risk, because that is literally what's going to happen. It could mean that overnight, in such a high risk industry, you could be unemployed. And at the moment, it plays a significant role in ensuring jobs for certain individuals.
So thanks, Ian. So the next two questions are both to yourself, Ian, as well as to JP. So I would like to just hear your respective views on this. In your view, is this move a genuine attempt at better regulation, or does it reflect a political agenda that could weaken public-private safety collaboration? If you can maybe just give me your views separately. Let's start, JP. I don't know if you're ready.
Yes, I would have liked to hear Ian so I can see the perspective from national, because he's closer to the legislation writing process. I sit at some distance. Yes, I sit at some distance removed from it. So I'd like to hear his view, but so that I don't sound like a parrot, let me just say that I have learned not to, and Jordan makes the point often as our mayor, not to attribute to conspiracy what can be answered by the simpler answer of incompetence. I think what happens with processes like this is that it's drafted by a large group of people, and they start with a good intention, perhaps like Arto, and then eventually everybody starts adding aspects. And then there are some bad actors in it who have a particular ideological agenda around disarmament, or a concern about the private security industry, or the belief that the private security industry needs to be reduced in scope or capacity. And they then feed these agendas in on the side. Common sense must prevail, and if one treats everybody as if they're acting in good faith, we can perhaps keep the conversation and the debate to a point where Ian and others are able to have sensible conversations with colleagues in the National Assembly across party lines and build a consensus around something that really shouldn't be political. That where we all understand the crisis in public safety we are facing in a country, that national government is not able to fix it at this stage. The current governing party may not ever be able to fix it. And that we need other partners, those who act in good faith, we absolutely do need, and most of them do, and that we want to work with those. There is always room for slightly enhanced or improved or more refined regulation. So it also can't be a situation that there's no regulation. The truth is that we have seen security companies having to step up in much bigger ways with heavier armaments, hardened vehicles, more body armor, etc. And you must always guard against the development of private militias, resources that are or policing unchecked use of force that is not in the public interest. So these things must come in balance, and that is going to need great wisdom at Ian Inham's policy and legislation debates and discussions to make sure that we do the right thing here. But I am cynical about the current government's agenda on this matter, and as Ian said, the timing is doubtful. Thank you.
Your response?
Yeah, so I agree with JP. The timing is doubtful. It's important. I don't think we should purely run down a path of conspiracy, but I think we should also not underestimate it. It's interesting when you look at the regulations and you basically read through them. You don't really get the idea that it's a process of what can we call it? Real reset. A broader safety process that they're trying to get everyone involved with. It actually does the opposite. The impression that's created is that it kind of has a ideological or a bureaucratic control kind of message, and it almost feels like it wants to assert or force that ideological or bureaucratic control over the private security industry, because the industry outperformed the state in so many different arenas. Now, in my opinion, if the state were clever, maybe I shouldn't say it that way, But I think they should actually see the private security industry as one of their biggest assets. If managed properly, and if the existing regulations were coordinated properly, they wouldn't have most of the problems that they are now complaining about, and it would actually be a huge help to the state. And even though private security already helps so much, I think even more could be done. In terms of parts of it, for example, about firearm record keeping, I think there's a discussion to be had. I don't agree with some of the regulations regarding that, but I know there are people that differ. But again, when you read through the regulations, it feels unbalanced. It doesn't suit the operational realities that these private security companies face. And in the last two things, Prazan, the first one, it's interesting to see that both the South African Police Service and even the SANDF don't face any of the equivalent requirements. So we don't really see that they are being forced in a specific direction. But there's a far bigger problem with their performance versus the private sector's performance. So it doesn't seem to be a universal process that's taking place. And I think if it were really genuine, if this was a genuine aim of improving matters, I think we would have seen that there was major transition mechanisms announced. So, for example, there would have been a part of the public consultation process that would have told us these are the steps. This is how we're going to work through this. Not this random arbitrary announcement that we are now forcing something down your throat and you will comply or else, because this is done in a way where they create an enemy of the private sector instead of saying how can we build a more sustainable system in the future.
JP, I see you want to make a contribution.
A short point that perhaps this is a missed opportunity to legislate greater integration of the private security with municipal control rooms, with SAPS's control rooms, like with your POC, POCC. We should be trying to see how do we give life to this principle of plural policing? How do we allow private security companies to play a more active role? What is the proper mechanism for that? Until we have the kind of state resources that allow us to do this, or allow the state to fulfill its proper role as a protector of the public safety. So I think that there is a missed opportunity. I did not see in the regs the mechanisms for driving the sharing of information, of which the private security sits on vast amounts, the sharing of communication systems, and the sharing of emergency response.
Okay, well, the DA started a petition. We launched a petition, where we called on public support to sign a petition against this regulations. What do you see, or what would you suggest? Should civil society and stakeholders, how should they respond to these draft regulations, and what sort of public participation or legal scrutiny do you foresee in this process? If you could maybe respond to that. I did see some questions in the chat as well. I don't know if you saw it. Maybe include that as well in your response, and then we'll open it up for one or two questions just from people on the webinar. Who wants to go first? Ian, do you want to start? Since JP says he doesn't want to go first.
Sure. Sure. So I think, in short, I think the way that we should do it, and I've already seen this being done in this past week with regards to the regulation, so it's really good to see, is that there's a coordinated advocacy through different associations, whether it's SAIDSA, SAGA, different security companies. There are different legal entities, or law firms that are all forming part of a more coordinated approach. There's a very, very clear media campaign at the moment to really highlight the implications of these draconian regulations, which I think is very positive. In terms of the scrutiny so far, from a legal point of view, several things have been highlighted. But I think one or two of the major things that stands out to me is the contradiction or the clash between the regulations and existing legislation. It's clear that whoever wrote this formed part of the formulation of these regulations have likely never been operationally involved. They clearly do not understand the reality on ground level, and they are very, very far removed from the broader, let's call it security legislation in South Africa. And I'm not saying everyone needs to be a legal expert on every part of relevant legislation, but it's clear that they haven't read for example, the Criminal Procedure Act or the Firearms Control Act. It seems as though they think it needs to be reinvented, and I don't think they really understand the confusion that will come out of this. But nevertheless, I think a discussion like we're having tonight is critical to have more of. It's also important to mention that, and this is what the CEO of CIRA, I bumped into him about 2 weeks ago at the Crime Summit in Gauteng, and he said that we must just understand that there are consultation processes that will still happen. And my answer to him was simply, but you should have started with that. You have now already made enemies through this process instead of pulling in the industry to actually make valuable contributions. So nevertheless, those processes will also follow. And I think from a DA point of view, what we will do is to constantly keep the public updated as far as we possibly can for any public participation process in order for us to assist in mobilizing as many people as possible to push back against this. And then the last thing that we shouldn't miss or not consider is the impact that this will have on the private individual firearm ownership. I have no doubt that this is a sly way of getting to lawfully armed individual civilians. And this is very, very important. We saw the previous Minister of Police try this. I'm not 100% sure how this aligns with the current Minister of Police, because it doesn't really match what he has said so far publicly with regards to working with the private sector or the visits to the private sector. But nevertheless, I don't think we should underestimate this as just being a small gesture of possible change. This is a direct attack on lawfully armed citizens in the country. And I think it poses a major threat to people being able to secure and defend themselves, and also, posing a threat that the state could potentially have the monopoly on your safety, which obviously is a major concern.
Hey, JP, what's your view?
I think there are two comments that were made in the comments that resonate with me. The one is that there is little doubt that disarmament seems to be a disproportionately large part of the legislation. I agree with Ian on that, and I agree with the comment earlier that Gun-Free SA seems to have had a very large hand in drafting this. The regulations do disproportionately focus on the firearms control, which I think is an encroachment on the domain of a different piece of legislation, which is being backdoored or wedged into the private security regulation regs. And I think that the state itself is underestimating how heavily dependent it is on private security. Police stations themselves, who utilize private security to protect assets, provincial, national, and local governments, who are all extensively dependent on private security. And it is so that the city of Cape Town has insourced a sizable chunk of money of private security funding and are rendering some of the security services ourselves with enforcement staff, but that's only possible in certain contexts. For instance, escort duties, policing escorts to some of our contractors and so. It's not feasible everywhere else, nor is it affordable in that the cost of rendering those services in-house is definitely greater. So I don't know that all of this has been thought through just from a cost viability perspective. And I think it is important for people to object. You have little recourse in law to take legal action or litigate later on, or apply to interdict the progression of that legislation if you've not submitted objections now. So please do make sure you get your objections in. At the very least, sign the petition. Make sure your objection is on record. Otherwise, you have little basis later on for wanting to get recourse in courts if national government and the national governing party and its intermittent proxies in voting on legislation cannot be dissuaded from a dangerous course of action in this regard. So please to support the objections. And I note the comment about local government and its own dependence on private security. There are many of the smaller municipalities, especially, who are unable to meaningfully establish and sustain law enforcement services, never mind Metro Police, and who the dependence on private security is significant. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to open it up for 2 or 3 questions. We do have limited time, so let's start with let's try and see if we can keep it within the next 10 minutes. First come, first serve. Let's see. We've got Angus, whose hand is up. Jean Jonker submitted a whole range of questions, which I did take up with Ian and JP beforehand, and we will submit our answers to those in writing. I think it's just the list is just too long. But Jean, if you would like to come in and raise one of those questions now, you are welcome. Is there anyone else who would like to raise a hand? Mike De Silva, I see his hand is up. And then a last question from anyone. No one. Okay, let's start. Angus, let's unmute you.
Hi, good afternoon, gents and ladies. I've been in the security industry as an operator for in excess of 30 years. The question I'd like to put to the politicians around the table, CIRA have become pretty irrelevant in the industry in that their powers have been largely taken away from them and their capability to earn money, and in that the industry is now set up a bargaining council. That bargaining council regulates all the wages, etc., where CIRA used to prosecute and fine companies for not complying with that. Sam Chauke has been at the helm of CIRA for a long time, and is it not possibly, is this drive not possibly, is it a political drive with genuine intent, or is it Sam Chauke's drive through the minister to make this relevant? What is the political agenda here? Are CIRA trying to become more relevant in the security industry market? They tried this firearms legislation in 2018 with the uniform legislation, which was thrown out, and the uniform legislation was passed. We also took them to court in 2008, where we challenged them on the constitutionality of Section 34 of the Security Officers Act, and claiming that it was antiquated and apartheid driven, and they asked us to back off. We withdrew, and they undertook to meet certain conditions. But to the politicians, the DA representatives, the guys that are in parliament, and that, is this a real government agenda, or is it a Sam Chauke agenda to keep himself and CIRA relevant?
Okay, thank you. Shall we take all 3 questions quickly and then answer, or do you want to answer one by one? Okay, all 3. Let's go, Mike.
Thank you, everyone. I would just like to really ask a question about alternatives. So aside from preventing the harmful aspects of these regulations, what positive reforms could possibly be introduced to enhance safety, especially, I guess, at a local level, at a provincial level, and perhaps at a national level as well? Thank
you. Okay, and then Jean Jonker, would you like to raise one of your questions?
Thank you, Croissant. I think I gathered all those questions from private security companies. Maybe I can just hand it over to Ryan, one of the concerned private security company owners. I don't know if Ryan can ask what's the most pertinent for him.
Okay, that's fine. Ryan, would you like to come in?
Good evening, yes. I think the questions, there's so many. I don't think there's one that stands out. I think they all go together. So there is a comprehensive list. Maybe you guys can look through it and get back to us. Just the question I think maybe that comes to mind is what gives CIRA the indication that they are qualified to try and regulate this? Where do they get off? They can't even fulfill their current mandate to successfully regulate the security industry where it pertains to non-compliant companies. CIRA are a money-making organization. They're not here for legislation. So what sits behind their motives?
Okay,
Done.
thank you very much. Are you done?
Yeah, done.
Okay, cool. Okay, let's start. Ian, would you like to give it a go to the first question and maybe perhaps even this last question?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to start with the last one. Is that the answer is simple? CIRA are not competent to handle this. It's that simple. Over the past few years, probably the last almost 7 years, 6-7 years, they've received several qualified audits. There are significant findings by the Auditor General in every report so far. And a lot of the people implicated in those findings still sit in the same positions that they are in now. Part of, and this is putting on a parliamentary hat now, part of my responsibility there and part of my committee's responsibilities is obviously to hold them to account. And we have started it. Unfortunately, it's a very frustrating process and it takes quite long. But it is extremely concerning to also see the amount of money that is unaccounted for, whether it's UIF money that was allegedly used for the wrong reasons. There are, for example, reports of training that was allegedly done in the Free State province to thousands of ghost learners. None of it really ever happened. Yet the money was paid, and I've got lists of examples, and we have started with a questioning process regarding this. The point is just that they are not competent to handle it, and they can be as angry as they like for me saying that, but the proof is in the pudding. And then, in terms of the first question that was asked for CIRA to try and stay relevant, I think financially they are very relevant, and the reason is that. It is millions upon millions of rands that go into the CIRA wallet every year. That is paid by the private sector. I think that they actually made a bit of a mistake with the overreach on this because a lot more eyes will be drawn to the mismanagement of that. And again, whether they like us saying so or not, the material findings with regards to their financial management speak volumes. And we've already started zooming in on that. So I think it's a matter of time before it gets extremely uncomfortable for parts of CIRA's management. Who the specific individuals are that are involved, there are quite a few. It's also interesting to have noted over the past probably just over a year that even internal whistleblowers are increasingly getting suspended for very strange reasons, or again, arbitrary suspensions because they blew the whistle on wrongdoing inside the organization. So lots of question marks with regards to the management of CIRA. So yeah, it could be an attempt of trying to be more relevant. Although I think the figuratively speaking, maybe literally too, the wallet was already in their favor. You see, the comfortable thing for an organization like CIRA is that they're always kind of in the background. People would much rather focus on the police or on IPID or the Hawks, or on a local level, they would look at metro police or municipal law enforcement, but they never really zoom in on the actual regulator because the assumption is usually made that the regulator operates properly. Unfortunately, in this case, fortunately for us, unfortunately for them, I think this will push a significant oversight process towards CIRA, and it's going to be very interesting to see what comes out on the other end.
Okay, JP?
So I think Ian has answered the question around motive very well. All I can do is perhaps show you that we are consistent in what we say on a platform like this and what we're submitting as a city. So our submission consists of a table with specific comments and objections to specific provisions. But it's prefaced by a general comment that says all spheres of government in South Africa, as well as the organs of state and state-owned enterprises, including the city, make use of private security. Private security plays an important role in securing city assets, which is vital for service delivery continuity, as well as enhancing staff and public safety at city facilities. With thousands of private security officers, deployed in public spaces, and even more so in private spaces frequented by the public, it must be understood that private security industry contributes much to the safety and quality of life of all South Africans. The proposed amendments to the regulations present a serious risk to the safety and quality of life of the South African public at large. These proposals place undue limitations on private security companies that will A, restrict their ability to carry firearms, B, force them to meet impractical regulatory demands, C, place them at risk of having to suspend their critical service delivery due to them being subjected to unreasonable procedures. As a result, the effectiveness of those responsible for safeguarding homes, businesses, and neighborhoods would be severely impeded. Organized crime and violent offenders can be expected to ramp up their illicit activities, as they will likely be emboldened by the deteriorating situation. The proposed amendments will not contribute to the safety of South African public. It will, on the contrary, deprive dedicated security personnel of the means to protect lives and property, ultimately leaving ordinary citizens more exposed to danger. It's important to note that given the lack of policing resources within national government and the South African police, the important role private security plays in improving safety should be acknowledged and appreciated. It's on this basis that the city supports the need for CIRA to improve on regulatory effectiveness. So the question was asked, what could we do? Any regulatory amendments should therefore strive to improve the industry in the context of private security playing a force multiplier role in public safety through its support of various other law enforcement agencies. It should also be noted that any regulatory amendments would need to compel the state to adequately resource CIRA for the implementation and compel CIRA into a more proactive monitoring of private security, their compliance to the prescriptions of the law, and their conduct while performing their duties. And then the city proceeds to unpack the various problems with the legislation, including making the comment that the city takes issue with the proposed amendments to the regulations in as far as it seems to add significant administrative burden to the industry in sometimes an unjustifiable or irrational manner in which the city's reading would fail to achieve the purpose of the regulations. Prohibitive and limiting stance towards the acquisition of non-lethal methods of defense remain puzzling at best. At worst, the proposed regulations will severely restrict the cities and government as a whole safety partners and would ultimately put more pressure on law enforcement agencies and the state's already stretched safety and security delivery. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian and JP. Just before we end off, Michael, which is my colleague in the legislature in Gauteng, and who sits on the committee itself. Michael, is there any contribution you would like to make at this stage, and maybe a final question from your side?
Thank you very much, Chrisan, and thanks very much to our participants, especially to JP and Ian. You're doing a sterling job in the city of Cape Town and, of course, on the national level in Parliament. This is indeed a very serious, and I think it's going to impact all of our ordinary residents' lives. I don't know if the participants would know there's a security company in the Johannesburg area called BCI Security. They've made light of this very serious issue. You know, it's very funny. I give the guys a thumbs up for having that innovation, by looking at the serious issue, but with a lighter note. At the same time, the video that they recently recorded tells us exactly what the private security guards or the service would look like in the future if this amendment, proposed amendment, should pass. You see security guards throwing broomsticks and mops at criminals. They're having to fight gun-wielding suspects with tennis rackets. And just to share some statistics with you, and I see there was also a question raised in the chat group. You know, it is alarming that we are looking at the latest SAPS crime stats for the third quarter. That's 2023 to the first quarter of 2024. Over 7,700 murders were committed in a period in South Africa, and 61% of that, and that is 4,726, were committed with firearms. Again, you know, it's been mentioned by Chrisan and our panelists, your cash in transit, your CIT attacks, they're normally, usually, and never miss involving heavily armed gangs with AK-47s, business robberies, and very important, you know, touches us very dearly, it's the farm murderers. Again, you know, there's always firearms involved. And having given you those statistics, JP and Ian, I want to pose this question to you. And this, I suppose, it touches all of us very deeply. What is your message to South Africans? People like me feels increasingly unsafe and are worried about these regulations that may make things worse. So please bear those statistics in mind and your experiences in having to deal with crime and those reports by SAPS. Please share with us your message. JP, I know you don't like to go first, so could I maybe put Ian on the spot? Thanks, Ian.
You're more than welcome. Thanks, JP, giving me the hospital pass. So Michael, I don't think we should lose hope. We should never lose hope. I think the first and most important part is to be involved in community structures. I'm a firm believer that you know, an active community safety structure is an extremely valuable asset to any community. And there's so much space within South African legislation that allows communities to really be actively involved. And I love the example that JP used earlier of what communities did, you know, in cooperation with local government and private security during the 2021 riots, or the threats thereof in other provinces. And that's so relevant. So I think that's the first part, is make sure that you're involved in a well-structured community safety initiative. I think the second thing is you need to make sure that you're part of this public discourse. It's so often that I receive, for example, tip-offs on things, and then it's not major or dangerous, you know, corruption-related incidents or so on. When someone just sends it and I say, but have you opened a case? No, I don't have time, etc. We can't, unfortunately, use that excuse. It's critical for everyone to be involved. And with regards to the specific matter, it's very important that each and every normal civilian submits whatever their opinion is regarding these regulations. This is something that will have a significant impact on the entire country, and we need to make sure that we do whatever is necessary to stop it from realizing. And I think we need to react in a way that forces the relevant authorities to come to the table and speak with us. So, there are many other parts. Obviously, from a political point of view, you need to be actively involved, and from a civil rights or an activist point of view too. But in my opinion, those two are two of the critical ones regarding this specific piece of amendment regulations. And we can delve a lot deeper, but those are just two of the valuable ones to me.
JP?
Grazan, thanks. I think Ian has covered it well, other than to say submit comment. Again, as I said, you can't litigate later if you're not part of submitting comment now. So make sure that you have a comment that deals with specific aspects. From the point of view of somebody who has been involved in the drafting of a lot of local government legislation or bylaws, very often people submit only very broad introductory remarks. They make broad sweeping comments. It's quite important that you attack specific provisions within the draft. The legislators to attend to the specific rules or reject them. And rejecting your comment needs to be on the basis of a rational argument. And it's that lack of rationality of the argument and the rationality of your motivation that you can later challenge in court, which may also be helpful to the DA, as we may well end up being the entity in the end that drags this to court, as we've dragged the VAT hike to court and other pieces of legislation, as we dragged the ARTO, the first iteration of ARTO, when national government tried to inflict it on all of us, and it was busy messing up poor Michael's son's enforcement efforts in Gauteng. You had a deteriorating public safety, road safety situation because they were being used as the guinea pig for ARTO. It may well be us who have to be the voice of reason in the end and drag this to court. So sign the petition. We can come back to you. The specific aspects of the unreasonability of the decisions they take in the end is what the court will pronounce on, and the failure to meaningfully consider the public comment made. Those are the procedural elements that we will be able to attack subsequently, and that Ian and other participants in that legislation process will be able to emphasize and compel attention to. And to everybody who has been part of this tonight, thank you. This is already a form of that civic activism. There's spending time on an evening like this, looking at it. I value our private security stakeholders. Some of them drive us nuts at times, as partners invariably do each other, and I'm sure we drive you nuts occasionally. But I have really come to appreciate the incredible value many of the private security companies play, sometimes each in their own pocket of the city, others more broadly across. And on the technology innovation, there are many things that we now do that we would not have done had it not been started by private security. And we spend our time chasing to catch up with what the private sector is doing. So we appreciate you always pushing or raising the bar and holding us accountable. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. Michael, do you want to make a final comment?
Thank you, Grazan. The other point that I think the industry will have a challenge is fair labor practice. We also have a very established and clear set of labor laws in the country. You can imagine the hundreds of thousands of security guards now having to work in a condition where their lives will be put into danger. So this is the other factor that I suppose the government has never properly thought of. And I must really say the public engagement process is really lacking. Now, what is the solution? I think the solution is very clear. JP has mentioned it, Ian has mentioned it, and Krizan certainly have, echoed those sentiments. We need to work together. I think enhancing collaboration between SAPS and the private security guards and the security sector, it's of vital importance. And having said that, I really want to urge our participants tonight to please share the information. Ask your fellow colleagues that are in the security sector to submit the objections. The last day is on the 25th of April, which is on this week, Friday, and 24. Thank you for the correction. And Ian, I stand to be corrected, but we as the Democratic Alliance will be submitting our objection to this proposed amendment also on this Thursday, and you'll be representing us there. So thank you again. Krizan, I think that's all from me. And I again want to thank you for organizing this webinar. It's certainly very much needed and will certainly bring more awareness within the industry and with the residents. And again, my huge thanks to JP and Ian for doing the sterling work you have done. And thank you very much to our participants. And I will close there and I'll hand back to Krizan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. It has been a long, slightly more than an hour that we spent together tonight just to discuss this very important issue, and I just want to thank everyone for logging in and joining us. There was some questions as to what can be done, and my colleagues Ian, JP, Michael have all touched on it, but one of the things I just want to say is that this webinar was recorded and we will be putting it out on our social media channels. So follow the DA Gauteng page, the Democratic Alliance Gauteng a Facebook page, as well as our YouTube channel. We will be putting this recording out onto that social media channel. So please share it as far and wide as possible so that we can alert as many people as possible as to what's going on, what the impact will be of this regulations and what they can do. And please also share the petition link to everyone. It doesn't need to be people that is in the security cluster. It can be ordinary residents. The more people we can get to sign the petition and to take a stand with us, the better for us and the greater our chances to make a difference in Parliament. Also follow the pages so that we can see the press conference that Ian alerted us to that will take place on Thursday, and then obviously also submit your objections. In the link on our social media channels, we will post the email addresses and the links as to where you can submit your objections. And if there's any further questions, feel free to email those to us and we will see how we can best answer that. I will put my email address out and I will coordinate with my colleagues to see how we can get responses to you as quick as possible. My email address is Krizane, Crezane, B for Bosch, at da.org.za. So it's Krizane, Crezane, B at da.org.za. So thank you very much to everyone for joining us. I hope you found it informative and that you are ready to join this fight with us to stop this regulations and make sure that we can keep our security companies empowered and promote safety and security in our country. Thank you very much. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.